Hi, this is Jim with Twisted Hobbies. Today we're building the Hacker Super Zoom Action. Okay, let's get going on the Super Zoom Action. So one of my favorite parts about Hacker Model is that they always include a manual in the box, which is fantastic, but I like to go to the internet and print it out so that way it's in full color. That way I'm not missing anything. Then I have the motor, the prop, the servos, the ESC for the power combo, and then separate from that we have the receiver and my trusty foam tack. I don't go anywhere without it. Let's get going on the build. Okay, let's get this switched around for you, and then I'm going to take everything out of the box and give it an inventory, make sure I've got everything that I should have. Then we're going to fold over the surfaces on the surfaces that need to be folded. So that's going to be the elevator, the rudder, and both wings. So I'm just going to put some weights on there. I've got some batteries handy, so I'll just put those on. While those are getting folded over, this is a good time to deal with my servos. On these servos, they mentioned clipping off these tabs. I've never done this before for a model. I don't think it's necessary for this one, but that's what they asked us to do. Here I'm headed to the hardware bag to find the servo extensions. I find those, I pop those out of this clear acrylic. And on these ones, I've dealt with these before, you just sort of pull the little ears apart a little bit, and then you can fit those over the servo horns. Now, they have us use some thread in the manual. You don't necessarily have to use thread and CA for this. You could also use just a screw and some CA. It's kind of up to you on how you want to put it together. I give each of these about 4 wraps, hit it with a little CA, hit it with a little kicker, and then we're all done. You'll see here that I am also using some parchment paper that I'm gluing stuff down on top of. You don't want to glue your stuff to the table on accident. It makes a big mess. So for everything that we're gluing, we're going to be using parchment paper underneath. Okay, next up we're going to be starting on the landing gear. What we need to do here is drill some holes. I'm going to do a couple holes down here, a couple holes up at the top. So I measure the full distance, I divide that by 2, I make a little scratch, and then that shows me where the middle is. And don't drill into your hand, use a piece of wood underneath. And then we'll use this support plate as a guide to drill 2 more holes. And then we'll glue on these little circular pieces to give the landing gear something better to screw into. And now that the glue is all dry on my servo horn extensions, I will cut off the excess thread sticking out. Next up, we're going to be working on the reinforcements for the wing. And this is a Blenderm style tape. And typically I forego this on my models, but the manual said to do it, so I wanted to show how I do it. So first we need a base that the tape will actually stick to. So you can use whatever adhesive you want to, but we're just gonna smooth it out so that way it's a tacky place for the tape to stick to. I let that dry up on all those surfaces. And then we can come back and install the reinforcement tape. On these, you really want to make sure that you are not binding up the surface in any way. You want to make sure it has full movement in both directions. And we're going to do that on the rudder and elevator as well. Now we're ready to glue the wing together. So first get your parchment paper out, give it a healthy amount of foam tack. I usually just apply it to the one side, squish it onto the other side, leave it apart for a minute or so, and then squeeze everything together nice and tight. Once that's dry, we'll start on the wing spars. They want this slot to be cut at 4 millimeters deep. You can use an X-Acto blade with like a piece of tape to show you how deep you need to cut it, or I like to use this slot cutter tool from Twisted Hobbies. It is excellent, makes the whole process super smooth. The bottom side of the wing has these little holes that show you where to cut your slot from, but those holes don't go all the way through, so I'm just using a little paper clip pushed all the way through to be able to guide me for locating it on the top. Once I've cut the slot, I'm going to fill it with foam tack and then press my spar into place. I do sand the spar just a little bit, hit it with some rubbing alcohol, let that dry, and then get it into place so that way it's nice and clean. Then I use a little screwdriver, I push it down all the way into the slot, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now that the spars are in place, we're going to set it aside to dry, and we're going to work on the reinforcements for the elevator and rudder. And on these carbon fiber reinforcements, we just want to give it a dry fit, make sure everything is the correct length, and then we'll take them all back out, fill the slots with foam tack, and then press them in permanently. We'll do the same thing on the rudder, and it gets a reinforcement on each side. Then we're going to glue the rudder to the back portion of the horizontal fuselage. And on this forward part of the fuselage, we are going to glue the landing gear reinforcement plate. And we take out those two little circles. We cut off about 3 millimeters. And then we press them back into place and apply some glue. Then we're going to attach the rear portion of the horizontal fuselage to the wing, and the same with the forward part of the horizontal fuselage as well. I used a few pieces of foam board in order to keep everything level. And we're going to put some reinforcements down the length of the horizontal fuselage. And it's a little tricky where this goes up and over the wing spar, but not too bad. We'll repeat the same process on the other side. In this case, I elected to use CA instead of foam tack. And that's just because it would be a little harder to put the foam tack into that slot, and I wanted it a little bit stiffer. Next, we can just break apart the vertical fuselage into two parts, and we'll do a dry fit and then add foam tack along the length. Press it into place, and then use our square to make sure everything is square. Then we'll use these lateral stiffeners, and that goes from the horizontal fuselage to the vertical fuselage, and we do that on both sides. Then we'll chop up these carbon fiber supports, dry fit them, put some foam tack on them, and glue them into place. Then we'll go back to the hardware kit, we'll find our tail skid, cut a slot for it, and glue it into place. Now at this point, I would recommend setting up your radio. I'll have a link to that process in the description, but I forgot that step and I just lucked out and all of these servos were perfectly centered out of the box, which was great. Here I attach my extended servo horns onto the servos. I place them into their pockets, And then we are going to glue in the aileron control horns. This comes in two parts. There's like a spacer and then the actual control horn. Put a little glue on the servo, get it into place, and then I'm going to cut a little slot for the servo wire. This part isn't totally necessary, but I decided to do it. I also run all of my electronics to the right side of the plane. We will make a little bend in our push rod, and then we'll attach the clevis to the servo control horn, and then feed the push rod through. I need them to be neutral, so that's why I put that gold X-Acto blade underneath theirs to hold it up, and then I'll glue it in place. We'll head back to the hardware kit and find these little circles. That's what goes on the end of our push rod to hold it in place with a little CA. We'll repeat all of these steps on the other side. And then we're ready to insert the motor mount. On this part, they say not to glue it in yet, so we'll hold off for a little bit for that. Then we'll run our landing gear through and screw it into place. Then we will install the servos into the top of the plane. So we will screw the servo horns on, feed the wires down through, and then we're going to be ready for the top half of the vertical fuselage. So we dry fit, make sure everything looks good, apply our foam tack, and press it all into place. Then we will measure for 90 degrees with our square, and then we're ready to start on our motor mount reinforcements. Be real careful you don't slice all the way through into your hand, but I just eyeballed it, got it into place, and then just cut along the carbon fiber with the X-Acto blade and made sure it mounted flush. Then I filled it with CA. And we did this for all four sides. And once those are all glued in, then we can apply some glue to the motor mount. And then we will glue on our vertical stabilizer and rudder. Then we're headed back to the hardware bag for some carbon fiber supports and control horns for the elevator and rudder. And for these, we're going to sand it up on the ends and then glue on the clevises. Then we can pop out all of our pushrod guides and then install them into the fuselage. We glue all the pushrod guides into place, and then we install the clevis onto the servo horn. Then back here, we're going to trim it and glue it in place. Once it's set to neutral, Just make sure that your servo is at 90 degrees and that your surface is in line. Then we'll do the same thing on the elevator. And then we're all done with our push rods. Next, we'll complete our landing gear by assembling the wheel pants and then installing them onto the gear itself. I really like that this gear contains 2 of the nylon lock nuts. That really makes adjustment on them easy. And now we're ready to start the installation of the electronics. First, I'll assemble all the parts to the motor. And then we'll mount the motor and ESC to the plane. I really lucked out on the prop balancing because it was already balanced, no tape needed. Don't forget your hub adapter, and then we're going to work on the CG. The manual calls for the CG to be 240 to 250 millimeters back from the front of the plane, and I found that the ESC needed to be placed as far back as possible in order to have a good placement for the battery. I'm planning on using 3S 1000 mAh batteries on this plane. And here I'm just using a bamboo skewer to hide all of the wires back in the reinforcement tunnel. And then I do want my battery to be on the opposite side of the plane from the ESC. So I'm going to push the XT60 connector through this way, and then I'm going to pop it up through the horizontal fuselage, so that way I can plug it in from the top of the plane. I have found the optimal place for the battery on my build. Yours might be a little different, but this is where mine seemed to be the best balanced. So now I'm cutting the slot through the vertical fuselage. Now that I've got my battery into the correct place and I know where it would want to be plugged in, I'm going to press an XT60 connector into the horizontal fuselage, and then I'm going to be able to cut out a hole so I can pass it from below. We just put a little glue on that to glue that in place, and now we'll be able to plug it in from the top of the plane. Then from here, I'm going to set up all of the surfaces on the model, make sure that all the trimming is done correctly, make sure everything's going in the correct direction. Some of them I had to invert, and then I'm just trying to get max throw out of all my surfaces, and then I can adjust it from there. Just a little bit of final tidying up, and then we are done with the model. Okay, we had a nice sunny day for the maiden flight, and the first thing that I noticed is that it is a solid plane. I can see this as a great 3D practice plane, as an all-around basher for being able to practice all your maneuvers. It was really smooth, inverted flying. It did really well. The thing that kind of surprised me about it was, first, it had lots more power than I thought it did. And when I'm trying to do something like a loop, it feels like it's really on rails and really flies super smooth, but you'll see it doesn't like flip around the wing. It more like rolls all the way through the loop. And I'm used to some planes that have a little bit more elevator authority and are able to flip around a little bit faster. So this was interesting to get used to its flight dynamics, because it really does want to loop much slower and more circular than other planes. I tried to get it to do a knife edge spin a couple times here, and it didn't really want to go into the knife edge spin like I was trying. I need to give it some more, because some planes just, you got to figure them out. You gotta feel how to tickle them just the right way to get them to do what you want. So I will continue working on that. I'm sure I'll get it nailed eventually, but it is super powerful. It still loves to do spins, just not the knife edge spin. But like I say, I'll probably figure that out in no time. It is quite floaty. It does a really great job in all the Harrier, and I've got a little bit of wind here pushing me, not a ton, but a little bit. You can see how I'm not quite vertical on this, but it is a rocket, and it really likes to get moving. I felt like the roll rate was spot on, and everything felt really smooth and graceful with this plane. And I am using a 3S 1000 milliamp hour battery, getting about 5 minutes of flight time on it with the flying that you see here. And here I give it a bit of an upright blender, and then just some knife edge. It was really nice and knife edge. It felt nice and neutral. And you can see here I'm giving it a bit of a sloppy rolling Harrier. It felt really controlled for slow speed. Here's a rudder pinwheel. And in Harrier, it was nice and predictable. You see me playing here in the wind. And it felt nice and smooth. Overall, I think it's a fantastic plane. I'm definitely going to use it as my basher. I'm going to be trying new stuff with it. It's going to go into the ground. I'm going to fix it right up when it does. But I hope you enjoyed the build of the Hacker Super Zoom Action, and I hope you enjoy flying it as much as I do.